Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Felicia Davis is a self-described girl from the South Side. She is deeply committed to community through inclusive service to others. As president and CEO of the Chicago Foundation for Women, she leads their strategic efforts in investing in women and girls as catalysts, building stronger communities for all. Felicia is passionate about transforming lives and serves as an educator and mentor through a variety of networks, participating in numerous boards and committees, including as a member of Governor J.B. Pritzker's Inauguration Committee, the Board of Regents for Mercy Home for Boys and Girls, an appointee to the Illinois Senate Sexual Discrimination, Harassment, Awareness, and Prevention Task Force, the American Cancer Society, and iHeartMedia Chicago's local advisory board. She has been in public service for the majority of her career. As a member of Chicago Police Department, she served with distinction for a decade as a police officer and then as a violent crimes detective. As interim president of Olive Harvey College, appointed by City of College Chicago Councilors Juan Salgado, Felicia led the college's effort in developing, maintaining, and evaluating academic programs and enhancing the students' learning experience for optimum achievement. She served as the inaugural executive director of the Office of Public Engagement in Mayor M. Emanuel's administration, where she led efforts to connect communities to resources. As Mayor Emanuel's first deputy chief of staff, she implemented community-focused strategies to increase public safety across the city. Felicia exemplifies leadership in all she sets out to do. She is a leadership Greater Chicago Fellow and a founding member of the Chicago Foundation for Women's Southside's Giving Circle, where she has blazed the trail for supporting Black women and girls through philanthropy and collective giving. Welcome, Felicia. Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Today with me, I have the pleasure to have Felicia Davis, President and CEO at the Chicago Foundation for Women. Thank you for coming, Felicia.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. Chicago Foundation for Women has been an institution is placed itself as an institution for Chicago. It's gained a lot of attraction in the last 2 years. I want to hear how you've grown, right? Because it's been really cool to hear the buzz. And I also want to learn so much about what you all do and how you support women in the Chicagoland area, but hopefully, at some point even potentially nationwide.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We were just chatting right now just because it's super relevant. And by the way, audience, today my baby has a little fever. And so you'll hear her in the background. And I apologize for that. I mean, I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry the audio is not going to be as clear. I'm so sorry, Felicia, but this is what mom's got to do nowadays. Take care of babies and record podcasts and all at once. Speaking of badass women.
Oh, I work at a women's foundation, so we're all for this every single day.
Absolutely. So tell us, let's start with the Chicago Foundation for Women. We're going to do a little bit that way because it's most relevant to just what we were just talking about today, just right now. So tell us, what does the Chicago Foundation for Women do in Chicago?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Chicago Foundation for Women, we're a community foundation. We raise money every day and invest those resources in organizations serving women, girls, trans, and non-binary individuals across our region. So in Chicago and regionally. We also, we're advocating for gender equity. We believe in 3 pillars for us are access to healthcare and health information, freedom from gender-based violence, and economic security and opportunity for women and girls. we're also part of a number of national coalitions, the Women's Funding Network, Closing Women's Wealth Gap, and a bunch of others. So on a national policy level, we're really involved in implementing, advocating for policies that make work equitable, that benefit women and girls. Reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, say, for example, in Congress, or right now with all of the impacts of COVID, the economic impacts of COVID, and how it's really impacted women of color predominantly, but women overall. 2 million women are still out of work. And just like you said, Marina, earlier, these choices between how do I provide for my family economically,
Yeah.
but also how do I keep them safe? How do I balance working remotely and remote learning for my kids, and all of the choices that women have to make?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the good work. Your background is amazing. And I will dig into that in a second, but we're just talking about something extremely 11 that just happened. Tell me, because you gave me the news, because I hadn't read the news yet. Tell me what happened.
So I was just sharing for the audience with Marina how fired up I was today, because just yesterday, the Supreme Court in the state of Texas, they just passed an abortion ban restricting women's access to reproductive health care beyond 6 weeks. But more than that, what they also have just done as part of that law is that anybody, you don't even have to know the woman, anybody could sue a person that they believe and bring them into court that they believe has somehow provided access to an abortion or resources for an abortion. It could be an Uber driver. It could be a receptionist. It could be a doctor. It could be a clinic. It's basically creating a vigilante state and a war, honestly, the way I feel, a war against women. And it is setting us back. It's dangerous. It's a giant step backwards, and it will impede women's economic and social progress in untold ways.
It is sad. It is extremely sad to me. And I'm almost like without words almost at this point, because as a woman in the workplace in America, I feel like I am treated as if having children is a choice, and yet it's not a choice I can control. Right?
Yep.
And so what, based on your you have extensive experience in generally like dealing with communities and foundation work, public service work in general. Like, I wonder, like, what is behind the need of controlling? Is this like, okay, I'm gonna go maybe a little bit left side on you, but is this like some weird way of population control? What is this? What is this need of controlling women's body and our reproductive rights?
Yeah, I just think it's racism, and I think it's sexism, misogyny, misogynoir, all rolled up into one. It's so funny. We, in our pre-conversation, we talked about this, how just advocating for yourself on different things becomes political.
Yes.
Like, that women's bodies have become politicized.
Yes. Being
able to make choices for myself is political. And it's only women's bodies that this happens to. Everyone wants to regulate what happens for women, what you wear, how your hair is styled. We've had to get laws passed so that women of color aren't discriminated against for wearing their natural hair, like wearing your natural hair. And so everything about a woman's body, it seems, is under attack and politicized. So for me, as an organization, for our foundation, we really believe in reproductive justice. We believe in choice. We believe in access to healthcare and health information. We know the economic impact that these things have on women not being able to decide when and where to have children. Restrictions around access to birth control. Different, healthcare in of itself is not gendered. Healthcare isn't gendered, but when we look at the disparities in healthcare, we see clearly how women and women of color are impacted. In my state, in Illinois, Black women are 6 times more likely to die in childbirth or soon thereafter from complications. even wealthy Black women. This is insane. And so to me, this is part of a bigger system. These systems really weren't designed for women. The decision makers aren't always women, and then the policy makers clearly in Texas majority male, but also not thinking about what's really in the best interest and giving women the fullness of their ability to make agency over their own bodies and decision making.
To me, it's clear that I stand for all the values you said, and to me, it's clear that one, there is some sort of distortion of a message that goes like being pro-choice is not equal to supporting abortion. Just to be clear, right? Being pro-choice means I will mind my own business. And that's all it means. And I will not control another person's choice on their life and what they do, with their bodies. And then the other thing to me is clear that they're serving a specific population. They're not serving the community at large. They're serving only those folks that they know will, in some ways, they think will move them forward in their political career. I'm sorry. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so what I was saying is that obviously they're serving a specific population as part of their elected votes, right? And they're not serving everybody, or representing, everybody in their community like they're supposed to. Are there any laws in Illinois that, perhaps not as extreme as this one, but that you have noticed or you can educate us about, or systemic things that are happening that are affecting women within our state or within our city, even within Chicago?
Well, as it relates to this particular issue, actually, and Illinois is actually, I would say, a good state where we are lucky to be in this state. I'm getting foggy on my details because of COVID, but Governor Pritzker in the state of Illinois signed the Health Reproductive Act into law, which really guarantees that the state of Illinois will remain open and accessible for reproductive choice, and that women have access to the full range of health care, and that includes reproductive health care. And so in that instance, Illinois is a beacon because the states that surround us, unfortunately, are not. And so right now, I think in Missouri, for example, there was one clinic in Missouri that in the entire state, there was one remaining clinic that was providing access to reproductive care for women in the state of Missouri. And so Illinois is actually good enough. But there are things every day that we think about that we could be doing better when it comes to our city or our state as it relates to women. Recently, police violence against women in Chicago and in the state of Illinois has been a problem. There was a case that made national news earlier this year. Miss Anjanette Young, whose home was raided. Which was an accident, but what happened in the raid is that her basic humanity was stripped from her, and that she wasn't afforded an opportunity to clothe herself. She was caught without any clothes on, and all of those officers stood there and allowed her to really be treated without any dignity at all. And so those instances, just recently this week, on a local beach here in Chicago, African-American woman was walking her dog and the beach was closing, and a police officer put his hands on her. She was walking away. The beach was closing. She said, I know. This was all caught on camera. And so she was mistreated by police. And so there's still instances of women being mistreated by police. And then just generally, I'm always concerned about the safety and welfare of women and girls trans and non-binary people. We had an issue in the city where Black women, over 50 Black women, were missing and murdered, and there wasn't a lot done about it. At Chicago Foundation for Women, we issued a special grant to help build awareness and advocacy around this issue. There was a similar issue with trans people who were being murdered or bad, or attacked in public. The same thing. And so we, as a foundation, one of the things that we work on centrally is really supporting women and girls, trans and non-binary people, and calling out, acts of violence against them and demanding that our policymakers, our political leaders respond to that.
This is such important work because it is an everyday issue that we don't see every day. You know what I mean? Like, it's so frequent. We're almost, but we don't hear about it all the time. Which takes me to the fact that you had you've had experience being a detective in Chicago Police Force for 10 years. And I'm assuming you made detective during those 10 years, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so the way you speak and the way you talk about this issue reminds me a lot of like a person that is in the field, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder, from a personal, professional kind of perspective, what do you bring from that experience? What did you learn that you're bringing to the foundation today? And how do you connect, those two things? Because I think they're fundamentally like super intertwined in some ways.
Absolutely. That, I say this all the time. The professional is personal for me, and the personal is professional, that I get to do this and I get to bring all of the experience, the different work experiences that I've had to bear in this work that I get to do every day, advocating for women and girls. I was a member of the Chicago Police Department for 10 years. I made I was in the violent crimes detective for 8 of those 10 years, roughly 8 of those 10 years. And that's a promotion that you earn. And I investigated sex-related offenses. And I also, for a while, investigated child abuse. When people call into the hotline, the child abuse hotline, I also investigated those cases as well. And so what I bring to this job, because one of our key pillars is freedom from violence, freedom from gender-based violence, and it happens in so many ways. It is when young girls are walking down the street and they have to face, not just young girls, women are walking down the street facing those catcalls. It dehumanizes you when you do make a complaint and then you're not believed, or perhaps even sometimes the police department in their response, they're insensitive, or sometimes the prosecutors who respond are insensitive. And having the ability to get your story told and have someone to really believe in you and then investigate it, right? To actually spend time to try to figure out and bring the person who caused harm to you forward. But the other thing, I think more than that too, Marina, is the impact that those acts of violence and such personal violence have on the woman or the person for the rest of their lives. I think we discount that. And so I bring that understanding, like this really deep awareness, to this work every day. I understand how our systems work. I understand when they work well. I also understand when they fail women and girls, or other people who have been victimized. And so I bring that, and then as a foundation, we have resources. We last year, or just this fiscal year that ended for us at the end of June, we granted over $3.2 million, the highest amount of grants that we've awarded in a year. So I also have the ability to invest in frontline organizations, nonprofit partner organizations who are on the front lines really helping with some of those problems.
Absolutely. And for anybody, like, obviously listening, like, this is a heavy topic and a very serious topic, and It is it is it is part of our reality. So please don't shy away from listening in just because you may feel impotent in terms of doing something right now. Educate yourself in this matters. It's always good to just have a perspective about this, to be aware of what's happening. But, I understand that also this is a time in which people feel emotionally overwhelmed. And so, this is not to bring you any more emotional anxiety, but to really educate and bring awareness into the issues that are real and are in our city and are affecting our women the women in this country, specifically potentially today in Texas as well. And with that, I would say, Felicia, like, for people listening, and I understand that from a perspective of like a listener view, is you may feel as if, you have no power or control over stuff. It's not happening to me, and therefore I don't know what to do about it, right? Do you have any suggestions on how people can participate in the community in whichever way you think, to aid and move forward the needle on this women related issues?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Even if it's not impacting you, we all have a role to play. On the safety of women and girls, and particularly girls, we all can start by believing them when they tell us that something has happened to them. And we may not know the right place to go, but these days we all have a computer in our hand and our cell phones. There's a Google search away from finding a place or resource that can really provide services, counseling, making sure that perhaps law enforcement is involved and so forth. But really, it just starts with starting by believing. And it doesn't just fall with, educators and other people who are mandated reporters. Each of us can play a role. Mm-hmm. But also, if we're standing on the bus stop and we see that a young girl is being harassed by a man, right, we can do bystander, there have been a number of bystander trainings. Last year and earlier this year, a lot of conversations around the AAPI community and the violence against Asian women, and the bystander trainings that have happened. And it doesn't take a lot, but bearing witness and supporting someone when they're going through that. On the other side of that, there's a lot of this that's for women and girls around economic access. One of the things that we work on now is caregiving, care work. So much has been talked about caregiving with the American Rescue Plan and with COVID and the impact and caring for our caregivers. All of us, in some form or fashion, have received care or are receiving care. Either it's child care, it's personal service, like our nails, our hair,
or beauty. Yeah.
We may have people who come into our homes to do house cleaning. Yeah. Yes, all of those things. So we all have a role to play in making sure that those women are protected, our homes, our people's workplace, that we act accordingly and that we provide them safety, but we also pay them equitably. So I'm going to ask your listeners to take a pledge and to think about this deeply, honestly. Mm-hmm. Think about all the people who there are people who make it possible for me to go to work. We talked about this earlier. The reason why so many women are not in the workplace right now is because childcare is still not readily available. It has not recovered. The president, the Senate, they've passed a bill that is enforcing childcare, reinforcing childcare and providing those services. But without it, we can't work. And there are lots of things that we wouldn't be able to do. And so my pledge, and I want your listeners to take this pledge, I pledge that I will not be the reason another woman is paid inequitably.
Yes.
I make that promise. I will pay equitably for all of the services that I receive, because those women are often working without health care. They're often working without access to paid leave, to sick time, and those types of things. If they get sick, they're not earning any money for themselves or their families. And so I would ask your listeners, they could all take that pledge to say, I will not be the reason why another woman is paid inequitably. And there are lots of your listeners who are probably managers and supervisors, right? Yes. Who also have the ability to give women pay raises, who know what people are earning in their company and their organizations, who are hiring managers. You know, in the state of Illinois, we have a law that prohibits you from asking for a woman's salary history. This is important. So that's why I'm really feeling good about where we are in Illinois right now, considering everything that's going on, because women are paid inequitably. And then if you pay me based on the last job where they're discriminated against me because I'm a woman, or I'm a Latinx woman, or I'm a Black woman, and I come in earning, I've been earning 63 cents on the dollar, then you pay me that, it continues to perpetuate that. So if you can't ask me, you have to pay me what you budgeted for that job. Absolutely. You have to pay me market rate, and we think that that is really an important step in increasing women's economic security. I cannot agree more. Absolutely. It is imperative that we take a step back and really, really, really dig deep and look at this work from an equitable perspective. Not for more, not to minimize anybody else, but just saying even it out, right? No, absolutely. And you know why people get all skittish when you start talking about equity, because they start thinking, you're trying to take something away from me. And when I talk about this, and sometimes, often I talk to a lot of white men about this, and I say to them, what you may not realize is that you are also being harmed by this inequity, because in Illinois, in our region, if women were paid equitably for the work that they are performing on a daily basis, that would be $58 billion more in our economy and GDP. And that means these women, that means your sister, your wife, your daughter, like every woman that you care about, chances are highly likely, the research suggests or shows that she is not being paid equitably. So you are actually being harmed by this. And so I want people to understand that these inequities don't just impact the people to whom or the people who get affected, right? It impacts us all. Yeah. Racism impacts us all. This is harm that's going on and being perpetuated. Sexism impacts us all. Limiting women's ability to thrive and to be safe and work impacts us all, and it certainly impacts our communities and our families. Very, 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 very well said. And I believe in this message, and please, listeners, talk to Felicia Davis. If you need some help, come talk to us. We are here. That's right. Without judgment. We'll take you, we'll take you out to lunch. We'll talk about this, and we'll teach you and ask any questions away. We'll be here. We're here for you. So now we have to go. Marina, a lot of people are going to be like, we're going to take you up on that. But truly, but we're tongue in cheek here. But the biggest thing is to have a dialogue. Yeah, absolutely. Is to really talk about it and to be honest about it, and for people to ask questions, not in a challenging, like at us type of way, like how dare you say this, but let me understand. So I always say, seek to understand, and then you also will be understood in that understanding. Absolutely. I really like that. Okay. So this interview has been really great because we got to touch more contemporary problems, and now I want to take you back. I want to take you all the way back, and I would love to hear, like, did you grow up in Chicago, and a story about you growing up? Okay, absolutely. Yeah. I did grow up in Chicago. Yeah. I'm sitting in Chicago right now. I am this is how Chicago I am. I am South Side girl, 312 on Twitter, on Instagram. That's how Chicago I am. So I am a girl from the south side of Chicago. For people who don't know what that means, Chicago is in a lot of respects, people say Chicago is a tale of two cities. Yes. It is a tale of those who have and those who have not, and communities that have and communities that have not. And the south sides and west sides historically have been those communities of have not and haven't been invested in as much. And also, it means that, when I was born, my mother had dropped out of high school and she became pregnant with me. And so I was born to a single mom and a zip code. And if those two data points, that's all you know about me, you don't know anything else about me. Those two data points determine my life expectancy. They determine my life outcomes, my educational attainment. And because of that, it was to suggest that my life was going to be very small. I had people say to me, oh, you're just gonna, drop out and get pregnant in high school and those types of things. Mm-hmm. And it hurts to even say that now. And I know it hurts because right now I lived in public housing on the south side of Chicago. What I know that people are saying this to girls right now, and it's really hurtful because they're basically dismissing all of her potential and they're counting her out. I had a mom who was in a lot of ways just wise beyond her years. She's still around. And she's like, you tell people this, they're like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, my mom's still around, which I'm glad for because she is able to see how her commitment and how her advocacy and those types of things live in me and live in my two sisters and in my brother. But my mother went back to school when I was a little girl because she said, I keep telling you all education is really important. And she said, if I tell you education is important, that I have to show you. And the thing is, I know we've just gone through a year of like remote work and learning and those things. When my mom went back to school for her GED, she had to take us with her. She didn't have a babysitter. She couldn't afford a babysitter. And so she had to take us with her, which was hard, right? Imagine, I know we've just been going through this, but we're doing it at home. Imagine getting on a bus and taking your kids to school with you and having to deal with that while you're also trying to learn. And the school there was a local community college that was in my neighborhood. That's why I'm a big proponent and believer in community colleges. They really wrapped their arms around my mother. They wrapped their arms around us and they welcome us. They didn't push us away. Think about how many schools would push that woman out and say, no, you need to go find childcare. We need to be more responsive to that. And so growing up as a girl in the south side of Chicago, I absorbed a lot of early lessons. I saw the city that I lived in with the eyes of a girl who saw a lot of disinvestment. I saw poverty. I saw crime. But I also, on the other hand, had a mom who told me, we were responsible for others. We have this responsibility to and for other people, who told me that it was my job to also, even though we were not wealthy people, we did not have we were living in poverty ourselves, to use what we could to help others, that I had a responsibility to humanity. And she told me that I had a responsibility to do good work. And my mama said, yeah. What you do, yeah. No matter what you do the best job you possibly can. And she gave me this work ethic. And she said, you do the best job and you be happy that you did a good job, satisfied with yourself, even if other people don't recognize it. And she says, I promise you, it will pay off. And I think that lesson, a lot of girls get that lesson, particularly girls of color probably get that lesson. I know other Black girls get that lesson when they're growing up because you're often overlooked. Your work is often discounted. You're often mansplained over, right? It's hard, but you have to keep going was like the lesson. So absolutely. Yeah, I'm a Chicago girl and I'm pretty proud of it.
How did you decide to join the force?
Honestly, this is the thing about the police department for me. Someone I knew, actually, so I'll just tell your listeners, they're not going to tell anybody. So it was really a guy that I was dating at the time, and he was like, you should think about being a police officer. He was on the job. But it was short-lived, but he said, you should think about it. He gave me the card, and they were hiring. And what the police department did for me is, one, I had equal pay for equal work. Right, because it is a union job for what people think about the actual union. It is a job where if I were sitting in a car with a male officer and he and I were hired at the same time, we were getting paid exactly the same thing. So that's one. Right. Two, it gave me incredible training, and the hours, you could work morning or days, you could work afternoon, you could work midnight. It gave you flexibility as a mom to kind of like figure out, and you make sacrifices. We all make sacrifices for work. But if I needed to work the overnight shift, or if I needed to work, 4 in the afternoon to midnight, so that I could make sure it allowed you to really have flexibility.
Yeah.
But the other side to that is I learned a great deal. Now, this is where I learned so much about our city. So much. For the first time, I saw lots of neighborhoods that I did not grow up in, and they were different. I could see that they had more things. They had schools that were better. They had parks that were like very improved. Their streets, their street lights, like
the playgrounds even are they're more modern.
They had the basketball hoops had the nets on it, not like
just
crate from the milk crate, right? And I know people are doing that milk crate challenge. Please don't do that. But, I saw that, and then I started, as a police officer, I went to places where my blue uniform allowed me to go that my black skin would not. In my city, where I would not be welcomed if I took off that uniform and went to that neighborhood. And I saw that. And so those experiences really shaped who I am, and even applied to this work every day. I saw the way in which people in our communities were calling for, dialing 911, but not because crime was happening, because there were a lot of things that they didn't know how to handle. They didn't know where to go for certain services and stuff. And so truly, the data shows in the city of Chicago, millions and millions of calls come in to 911. We could talk about people using the non-emergency more, but these calls come in, and overwhelmingly, the majority of those calls are not about crime as a police officer. They're about other things, social things that our communities are still in need of today.
Absolutely. I would not ask you what those neighbors are, the ones that do not welcome you, but you know who you are. You're listening, you know who you are. At some point, after you joined the force and made detective, you decided to leave the police force. And in some ways, it feels like a drastic change of career, but I want to hear that from you. Like, I don't want to say it's a dress. I want to hear that from you. But is it definitely like completely outside of communal public service, I guess, into education?
Yes, yeah, which is to me public service too.
Yes,
but I will say you are right in that people don't usually leave the police department. It is a great job with benefits, and it's still in the public sector, it has a pension at the end of your service. For all the challenges that it had, it gave me a lot of opportunities. It gave me a presence about myself. It taught me about community, about listening, really listening, and also figuring things out pretty quickly because it's a pretty fast-paced job. So it gave me a lot of skills. But I'm a woman, and I was a married woman, and we were having children. We were growing our family. And so I did what a lot of women do. I did an off-ramp to take care of our kids. And at the time, I've been a foster parent twice in my life. I'll be one again presently.
Soon?
Yeah, like right now. So
you are one right now?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so at the time that I originally took a leave of absence back in 2001, it's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God. 20 years ago. When I took that leave of absence, it was because I had 3 boys under the age of 5, 2 other, biological children who were like, I think they were like in 5th and 6th grade. I'm blanking, and a foster child who was also, I think he was in 7th grade. So it's a lot of kids. And so my husband was also a detective, really busy, work-wise, and I did an off-ramp. And then I decided to go back to school and started working at the school where I went back to, because, the reason why I went to Kendall College, it was in Evanston, Illinois at the time, because when I retired from the police department, I wanted to own a bed and breakfast. In my head, I still have this. even though I feel like I'm nowhere close to retirement, which is a weird thing to say considering I left the police department 20 years ago. So I feel like I'm further away from retirement than I was back in 2001 in a lot of respects. But I wanted to open a bed and breakfast, so I went to Kendall College because they had this program.
Yeah.
And I wound up being hired there because, I had been a police officer and I'm an adult on a college campus. And I just started offering, advice or my unsolicited opinions about student services and some policies and things like that. And the administration at the time recruited me to be there, and I grew in that job. I was there for 10 years. I started a whole new career, and I looked up, I didn't say I was never going back to the police department. I just kept working, and I looked up, and it was 10 years that I had been gone, and I just kept going with my career into different directions.
That is a very, I'm super happy because it took you, I'm sure it gave you a different set of skill set that you now can use, for instance, for other applications. I wonder, the kid, what is it about having, the 6 kids and the husband that will make the police department life not work for you in that moment? And what did the college or the Kendall College position did do?
The thing is that, I was a detective, and so when you get a case, it's very much like, I know people, maybe your listeners watch some of the crime shows on television, so like Law and Order or how I used to really like to watch Homicide when it was on television.
Nice.
Or The Wire, if any of your listeners watch The Wire. The thing about it is, as a detective, you usually have 48, or the first 48. You have 48 hours usually to try to figure out that the best chance of getting the information, talking to witnesses, getting that eyewitness testimony. And what that means is that often you have to drop everything and you're working around the clock for 2 days. And so with, in the beginning, it was, it was like having someone pick the kids up from school, and then, my neighbor whose kids were in school, and then I had to have somebody go get them from there. And then, it was a lot. And I just decided to just take that time and invest in my family. And I was fortunate, we were fortunate, but it was a big gamble because, we cut our income in half, and you just have to make different decisions. For a long time, I drove a car that was, I basically drive the wheels off my car. We didn't take any luxury vacations. We invested in our kids. We invested in their education. And so you do make sacrifices. But I will say that I also, in some respects, and for the women who are in your audience, invested in myself. I took a chance on myself. Yeah. I went outside of my comfort zone. I took a big risk, and it paid off. I didn't know what the journey was going to be. I didn't know that, 20 years later, I would be sitting here as president and CEO of Chicago Foundation for Women. I took those opportunities that were being presented to me. And so I know there's a phrase out there that, things are right outside your comfort zone. I would reiterate that. And I had so many of my colleagues, friends from the police department come up to me and say, "Oh my God, I'm so proud that you did that." They would say, "I wish I could leave." And I said to them, "You can. You have to make a choice, right? You can." And it's not the only chance that I've taken. I've taken a couple of pay cuts in my career. And so women who are thinking about, I have young women who are like, "Well, I need to get paid more. I need to get a job and get paid more." And I say to you, evaluate what you're going to learn in that new job and the skills that you're going to learn in that new job, not just the pay of that new job. Let me just be clear, because I am not in any way advocating that women should be underpaid. But what I'm saying is that we have this mentality like everything has to be like forward movement. Sometimes lateral movement or taking one step back to take 2 steps forwards is okay, depending on the circumstances. And so in full disclosure, there have been opportunities that I've taken where I did not make more in that next opportunity than I was making. But overall, if you look at my life and my trajectory, it has always continued to go up from that respect.
Yeah, that's a beautiful lesson too. It's like bow and arrow, right? Sometimes you have to do the tension to go back to move you forward faster.
I love that. I love that.
And after you grew into the role of Vice President of Operation and Student Administration for Kendall College, which, by the way, would love to hear. Maybe would love to hear like a few less. Actually, we can do this. Let me wrap up the police force.
Okay.
Do you have a funny story from the police force days that you can tell our audience? And then also wrap up the Kendall College position as well, and tell us about maybe the leadership that you learned there. So those two things.
All right. So I have a story. I have a lot of stories from the It's all funny, but I do have one that's it's kind of funny. There came a point where I wanted to be, women can be driven in our careers and we want to have different challenges and so forth. So there came a point in my career where I wanted to have this assignment that you had to be, I couldn't take a test to get it. Somebody had to give it to me. And I asked to be put in this assignment. And I had a male lieutenant say to me, "Oh no, you don't want to do that because the women who do that, I kind of know what he was getting at. He never landed the plane. He just kind of hinted and had these innuendos about the type of woman. He said, "You're really nice. You have a nice family. You don't want to do that type of work." Mm-hmm. And the lesson there for me was that he was really limiting my potential. Mm-hmm. He was, in his mind, he's being well-meaning. In his mind, he's protecting. But what he is doing, he's being paternalistic. He
patronizing.
Right? He is making decisions for me. And we talked about choice at the top of this conversation. He is limiting my opportunity. And so because of that, I wanted that assignment. I couldn't get it. That's when I was like, I'm going to study. I have to earn my own promotions. And I earned, and I did that. And that's when I became a detective.
Wow.
So that's the story that I have there. But I will say this. I also had a male lieutenant when I did get promoted to detective say to me, and this is why male allies are really important. He said, "All right," he said, "listen, when you go over there, they're going to try to put you over here in this area." He says, "because that's where they try to stick all the women." And he said, "Absolutely not. You push and make sure you get into violent crimes." And that lieutenant is the reason why I was a violent crimes detective, because he told me that women get pushed off into that other area. So those are my two police stories that I'll tell you. I have a lot of other ones, but we have to be having drinks and, I don't know.
I gotcha. That's our next private conversation.
And then at Kendall College, what I will say is that this is why I think about my career and like how it's all really been about public service. Mm-hmm. Because by the time I came to Kendall College, as I said, I'd been on the police front for 10 years. I'd been a girl who grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'd seen the city in a lot of different ways. And this was in a time in higher education where there were students were really being pushed out. Any student that was like the other, there were a couple of big incidents that happened on college campuses. So there was a lot of fear. And so I was very crystal clear-eyed in that we need to keep, I knew that by the time a young person got to our college, they had already gone through so much, particularly students of color. They had already gone through so much. Think about the odds, right? I think about myself. So the gift that I could give them is that we needed to keep them in community as long as we could. Also think about brain development. Young people's brains don't develop until they're in their early 20s. And that if we kept them in college and we graduated them, that the success that they would have in life was the odds were so much better. And so I really worked with the faculty and as administration to create policies that helped to nurture our students, that were really student-centric, that kept them in school. And so I will say, and I love the energy of a college campus, especially when it really is about the students. Not all colleges or universities are student-centric. They're bringing you their dreams and hopes, and you get to help them shape that, and not in the way that lieutenant did it for me, right, and limiting me, but in a way of opening doors for them, and that really is an investment in the future. So that's why I look at that work also as public service.
Beautiful, absolutely. I really enjoy how thoughtful you were into your role, right? Like because you came from you were their target audience in some ways, and you worked in the community directly with the young people. You already came with additional thoughtfulness that often is not, believe it or not, is not necessarily incorporated into college administration.
Right.
Because again, college administration could be one of those areas that is not necessarily representative of the communities they serve. And what I mean by that is, colleges that serve minority or marginalized communities sometimes have a all-white administration in Chicago, and so just to create a little bit more awareness over there. And then lastly, before you, you had a few more things in between, but lastly, before you really stepped into presidency for the Chicago Foundation for Women, you served for the city of Chicago in various roles, including first deputy chief of staff all the way up to executive director. And so I would really would love to hear about what is it like to work for the city first, and maybe some lessons that you got from that experience as well.
Yeah, so in 2011, I went into the administration. Chicago had gotten a new mayor. Rahm Emanuel was that mayor, and he had just come out of the Obama White House as chief of staff. There was a lot of energy around it, and he asked me if I would join the administration. And at first I said no. I was hesitant because I was comfortable in my job at Kendall College. I was, really enjoying it. I really enjoyed the work with students. And then I had a friend say to me, you have a unique viewpoint and perspective that's really important. You touched on this, right? Like, representation matters, that you come from the same communities that we're trying to impact. And that too often in public policy, the people who actually have the lived experience are not at the tables where the decisions are being made. So there's this huge disconnect. And she said to me, so will you be comfortable sitting on the sidelines and as the city changes in a lot of different ways and not providing that voice? And so ultimately I said yes, and joined the administration. And I learned so much. Mostly what I learned is that I already had the skills that I needed to be in that job. And I was a person who, I actually don't think I had ever been at City Hall in my life. So I wasn't like this person like, oh, I need to go be, work at City Hall or anything like that. But I came in the door and I said, my responsibility is to bring in the voices of the people who look like me, the communities that I have been in, and bring that to the table. Whatever the decisions that are made, I will bring that voice. And that's something that I do today in the work at Chicago Foundation for Women. I am really committed to making sure that the community voice is heard in any room where we are, to bring a microphone and amplify those voices, because too often people think that communities that have challenges, there aren't resources, there aren't intellectual resources there, thought partnership. The people who are closest to the challenges and the issues are also better able to help us make solutions. And too often their ideas are left on the floor. And so I did do a lot of different things at the city of Chicago. I learned so much, but mostly, again, I think what I gathered there was the understanding of how the city, the county, and the state work, how they work well together and how they don't work well together. And I take that, right, and how I brought that to this role at Chicago Foundation for Women, because I understand systems change, how we can get a system change, how we can get a policy change, how we can get a law enacted, how we can get an ordinance enacted. I actually know that. I was building commissioner, for example. I was listening to public radio today. I enacted a problem landlord list. As building commissioner, you're really about providing for the safety and welfare of the citizens and residents of Chicago. As a girl who grew up living in apartments and in places that were not well cared for by landlords, but who took my mother's rent money every month, maybe not having adequate light, heating, all of those things, lead paint issues. We still have some of those issues today. I lived those things. Mm-hmm. And so as building commissioner, I enacted ordinances and worked with our city council to get ordinances to protect those very people who were me when I was a little girl, so that kids could study and not worry about whether or not they had enough heat. And so I was listening to public radio today, and they were talking about that that the city had not been really updating that list, and that the city had just said that it was going to start re-updating that list. And I felt a moment of pride in being the person who put that into action. And that even today, even though I'm no longer serving in that role or capacity, that I am still helping to ensure that our residents are being well cared for and marginalized communities are being protected.
I think it's so powerful to have this knowledge, and I cannot imagine hearing, you know, how your impact is like actually still alive today. Like, I think that's amazing, and at the same time, I think this knowledge is also extremely it's a black box for a lot of people. Like, I firmly believe that, you know, a small group of women could have the power of enact effective law changes, especially, you know, for their own community effectively. And at the same time, I don't know that, you know, like I'm an intelligent, sometimes I'm an intelligent, smart woman. I consider myself one. I think I can figure things out. And yet, you know, I have no idea how to do this. Can you please, like, either please give us a class, right? I don't know, through the foundation or whatever. Give us a class on how to change law and create legislation that matter for people or something. Because I would have, like, a bunch of people sign up to that, like, for sure, hands down. Or, like, give us some tips about, like, how do we go about enacting systemic change in the city for good? And help us at least get started with that, because it's such an important work that I feel like anybody could. You don't need a law degree to do this work, do you?
You absolutely don't. You absolutely don't. No.
What do you need, though? What are the skill sets?
You just need passion and commitment and tenacity, right? In my office, you can't see it here, but in my office, I have this quote on the wall, and it says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that has. And that was Margaret Mead. That's on my office, because I really believe that.
Yeah.
So much change that's happened in the world has happened because of women. Because women have organized and because women have advocated. And everyday citizens, you know, Chicago, one of the reasons why I love Chicago, I mean, we're the home of community organizing, right? Grassroots organizing, retail politics, knocking on doors, campaigns to change information, changing hearts and minds is sometimes what I say, in the work that we do. So, you know, passing petitions. Women are really good at these things, and sometimes I think we discount ourselves. We could, you know, we're good at organizing, after school activities, play dates, sports things that we have to do, PTA things that we have to do, all kinds of stuff. It is the same skill set, and taking those same skills that we already have and putting that towards calling elected officials if there's an issue, writing a letter to the editor in your local newspaper, calling your local news, running for office yourself. I could let's just be clear. If Texas had more, going back to how we started this, and I don't want to, this is my soapbox today. If Texas had more women in elected office, I think that it would be different. The outcomes would be different today. Mm-hmm. And we could say that state over state over state over state, how things have really changed when women come to play. And so every one of your listeners can absolutely take a stand where they are. If you, as simple as, does that corner next to the school need a stop sign? Are kids, you know, then you advocate, organize a petition, get that petition to get a stop sign on that corner so that kids can be safe walking to school.
Love it. I love it. And I think we could have a whole conversations about how to do that, right? Like, and I don't want to exhaust this here this second. But I'm very interested. I don't know. We may do that soon. We may just change the world one petition at a time.
There you go. And with social media, it's easier to do. Change.org. You know, you can put it up on Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. The GoFundMe and there are a lot of tools that make those things easier. Twitter, you know, tweeting at people and getting kind of like recognition.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Great. That takes us all the way up to your your current role, president and CEO of the Chicago Foundation for Women. Tell me from a personal perspective. Mentally, where were you? Or were you top on the shoulder for this role? Did you apply for but honestly, like, you're doing other things, and then, how does a woman grow into heading a foundation, honestly? Like, how does that happen?
Right. So tongue in cheek, somebody asked me that I was talking on a panel to some young people, and one of them said they were at a college, Persistence, helping kids graduate college, get to college and graduate, underrepresented populations. And they were like, how do you become a foundation president? And I said, well, you go to the police department for 10 years, and then you go in higher education for 10 years, and then you go, but truthfully, how I got here is that, CFW has been, Chicago Foundation for Women has been in Chicago for 35 years. This is our 36th year, doing extremely great work in all the areas that I told: leadership development for women, helping women serve on nonprofit boards, pushing for pay equity and gender equity, supporting organizations on the front line, all of those things. So year over year over year, and I knew about CFW before. I served on an advisory board for one of its committees, but when the position came up, I did not immediately raise my hand, and I was not tapped on the shoulder. They had a national search. But what led me here, which I think was your question, is that, and this goes back to 2018, was really a rough year for my family personally. My aunt, who was like a second mother to me, who has as equal part in who I am today as my mom. She lived with us when we were growing up, and really she was my mom's childcare while my mother could work. My aunt had a stroke and collapsed and was in a coma for two months or so. That summer, my niece died of a drug overdose. My very young niece died of a drug overdose. And my mother was really, really sick. And so this was like June, September, that whole summer. By the time we got through that as a family in October, I said, whatever I do next for work will be something that's really personally meaningful to me. When I started earlier and I said the personal is professional, that I didn't want to waste more time. I wanted to be able to use my voice in the best possible way, and I wanted to be able to advocate for the things that I really, truly believed in as an individual, and try to make a difference. And whatever time I have left for work, like to use that time to make a difference in a more, not that the work that I had done before wasn't good, but this time it was going to be more personal to me. And the position happened to be open, and they were doing a national search. And a couple of people did say, you should think about that. You should think about that. But I had not been in philanthropy before. I had not been at a foundation. I hadn't even really been, even though colleges are nonprofits, from a tax status standpoint, 501c3s, I had not served at, a small nonprofit organization. But as we've talked about today, I had all these other experiences and perspectives and skill set and networks that can help make change for women and girls. I know how to drive policy change. I know how to work on the community grassroots level. I know how to bridge the gap between the two. Too often, the policymakers don't talk to the grassroots people and vice versa. And how do we close that gap? I had those skills, and someone ultimately encouraged me to apply for the position, which I did, a series of interviews, and I have been so happy to be here and so happy to lead this really important work every single day. And then, COVID happened, and being able to really focus on women and girls and in real time, have everyone better understand what this foundation had been talking about for 35 years. This is it. We are living through it right now, that women can't go to work because they don't have childcare, that women are dying because healthcare is not equitable, that women are being underpaid, and that means that they have to make choices around lack of housing, lack of food, all of these things, and that young girls like myself, who are smart and bright and talented, who we should be investing in, we will be investing in. And so I'm really happy to do this work.
Oh, that's amazing. That's beautiful. That's well, very, very, very tight, very well said. I love it. I love it. Okay, so this concludes our time. Believe it or not, we are really,
Wow.
really close. And I know I actually took you a little bit over just because baby was crying.
No worries.
I have our outro questions, and then we're gonna say goodbye to our audience. You ready?
Yes.
What is one thing we don't know about you that you can tell us?
I sing in a band.
What type of music do you sing?
Everything. I grew up in church singing gospel music. So I sing pop, blues, rock, a little bit. A little country sometimes.
Right. There's this karaoke here in Wicker Park. We go often. It's called Bar Louie. We can go sing. Sometimes.
We can go sing. Yes, absolutely.
I am not good at singing, but we often go there and make fool of ourselves. It's really fun. What is a book you have gifted the most?
The book that I have, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, by Dr. Christiane Northrup.
Love it. What is a book you would write?
I guess my life story. Felicia's, Southside girl.
312.
312. How she tried to change the world.
What is one thing you would want the audience to remember?
That every person that you encounter has a story, and that we should, when COVID has taught us that we can slow down, we should slow down enough to connect with them on our humanity level and listen to their stories and share our own.
Beautiful. You've been extremely patient with me and baby today. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I hope you come back.
I will, Marina. Thank you so much. I was looking for
thank you. Thank you. Woo! There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your networks and friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest at www.unbossed.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unbossed.io. See you next time. Oh, that was good.